Hello, I'm back doing a thing with the internets and cameras and presenting to you. It's Pair of Geeks video that do the thing. So I've been thinking a lot lately about storytelling. When you think about it, role-playing games are kind of the oldest tradition in human existence because they are all about storytelling, and storytelling is so endemic to the human condition it actually predates prostitution. The earliest communication between the most primitive animals on earth, it's conveying a story. Something makes a chirp, it means that chirp chirp, the big predator with the T-Rex and the little tiny arms is out to kill us, run away. It's storytelling is really just part of being something that's alive and can communicate. Any social creature has at least a form of storytelling. Even cats and dogs dream. And with stories, as human beings, we've taken this to almost a science. Hollywood kind of knocks out movies by formula, and right, this is the haunted house trope, and this is the comic book trope, and all this stuff. And you've got various storytelling tools that we now understand, things like the hero's journey, and I always forget the name of the author. God, there's information in here that I can't get out of my head right now. Switching topic anyway. The point is, I was thinking about this recently, and I don't know if you know this, to all my viewers, there is a new channel now for Pair of Geeks. We have Pair of Geeks 2, which is where we're putting all of our live play videos. The reason for that, so it's not... getting ahead of myself. Right, so I've opened up a second channel to put my live plays on, because when I used to put a live play on the main Pair of Geeks channel, I'd always lose subscribers. At the end of the day, some people want live play content and some people don't. It's 4 hours of watching someone play a role-playing game. Not everyone's cup of tea, but some people like to have that on with that ironing or driving or whatever, I don't know. Anyway, second channel for that now, so dedicated content goes over there, and of course that allows us to do more, or broadcast other stuff that we would never have thought about. I've been broadcasting a Twilight Imperium game. So yeah, I'm going to do stuff like that. Any live play stuff goes on that second channel. You'll find it if you go to the channel page for Pair of Geeks. You'll find it as a featured channel on the right hand side. The channel name at the moment says Becky Rose because it hasn't got enough subscribers to have an actual channel name yet. When it gets to 300, if ever, then it'll become Pair of Geeks 2. And until then, it'll just say Becky Rose. But anyway, started this role-playing game on it, and I'm quite proud of the method of storytelling it does, because one of the things that tends to happen in role-playing games, when you take it back to old school gaming, you have this kind of concept of right, you roll some stats here, so you've got random stats on your character, and then you've got a map, and it's a hex map, and you're going to move from this place to this place. And I always used to tell this joke that in role-playing, all journeys are 3 encounters long, or 2 if the party's impatient, and 1 if you're running short on time. But the point is, some groups will do it differently. They'll say for every hex you move, you roll a random encounter, and I kind of, that's a very old school approach. And the thing is, it doesn't convey any storytelling, and that's why I don't use that approach today. I did when I started out, of course, because I started out in old school times, but these days I try to draw from the art of storytelling more than I draw from the history of RPGs, if you see what I mean, and the way we used to play them. And one of the things I took to doing a long time ago was in media res. Okay, switch camera. Do the in media res is it's a storytelling idea where you don't start at the beginning of a story. you start in the action, and it's particularly. I'm going to switch back to this camera. That was my cutaway camera. So back to this one. So it was the start. I mean, I don't know what story first had in media res. I haven't looked at the history of it, but it's something that's very common in Hollywood. If you look at Hollywood movies, quite often the first sort of minute or two of action will be really dramatic and draw you in, and then it'll cut to building up the story, setting the scene and introducing stuff. And that's kind of grown out of the way Hollywood as a business works. The reason for it is simple. You've got lots of people write a screenplay. It's very easy to write a screenplay. All you need is a typewriter and some imagination, or modern days I suppose a computer and imagination. Anyway, so you start off with the screenplay and you send that off to a producer or a director or something, and anyway they read this and then they go, oh god, I get millions of these. First, only your first page is getting read. So it's a golden rule of writing a screenplay, is that your first page must be the best page you've ever written. You want to excite the person and draw them in enough to read the second page. And so what tends to happen, particularly with movies from an unknown screenwriter, is you'll start off with this in media res situation where you've got stuff going on and the hero's in a dramatic situation, but that's not necessarily great for telling the story, where you want to introduce characters and the like. But it's an interesting thing to work with in a role-playing game, because you've actually got some of the similar problems. If you play in a regular group and you get together every week, you might have found yourself in this situation where players don't buy into your campaign world, and they don't commit to the game, and yet you've got this amazing thing planned out that you want to do with them, but after one session they're itching to play something else, or somebody else is itching to run a game or something like that, and it's because you didn't make the first page of your RPG the best RPG you'd ever written. You've got to wow your players sometimes to draw them into the world, so that you can then introduce all the politics and the backstabbing and the NPCs and the dramatic scenery and everything else that you were going to do. So I like to start in media res. I like to make sure my players are absolutely hooked into what's going on. I often say I start every adventure with either an explosion or a chase. I started an adventure. The one time I started an adventure in a tavern in the last decade, the very first moment was the tavern exploding, and that's just how I like to begin things. Put people right in it. Another adventure I began, and feel free to take this as an introductory setup for a campaign. My players were committing a ritual, a dark ritual with chanting and all sorts. This is how I introduce the scene. You're there in this gothic looking building, there's a pentagram on the floor, you're in dark robes and you're chanting, and then a flaming catapult ball comes crashing through the ceiling into the middle of the pentagram. But game starts, and in that case it was an orc invasion, which turned out to have been the orcs were driven up from the underworld by an arrival of a Dracolich, and that all had stuff to do with all the amazingly complicated stuff going on in my world setting. The point is starting with the excitement of the scene, drawing people in. But then I was thinking about this recently, and I was thinking, right, I want to start the game off. I start a game off with, in not at the very first scene, because I was about to play a game of Corporation. Now, Corporation is one of my favourite games. It's a game that you don't have to take seriously at all. It's very over the top and ridiculous. It's set in the future. You work for an evil corporation, and your job is to make money. And you can invariably, the way the game is set up to work is you start with a mission briefing. And you go from your mission briefing into the scene, and you're telling the story in sequential time. And the problem is, at the start of every Corporation game, it's actually a little bit almost dull. It's a mission briefing where you're setting up what the players are going to be doing. And I kind of thought, I don't want the build-up. I don't want to set the backstory. I want to start, in this case, I wanted to start with two lorries on a bridge having a chase. Racing each other like boy racers, but in lorries. And the premise was my players were playing people who sell tea. They're working for a tea corporation, and they were going to go off to Boston in America and sell tea to Americans. The whole backstory to how that came about. I was an innocent passenger, is what the players wanted. Anyway, so I've got to write this game. My players wanted to blow stuff up, selling tea to Americans. So what can you do? Got to go with the flow sometimes. But that's a very corporation type thing to do. It's not a game that takes itself seriously. So I thought, right, I want us to have this situation where you've got this clapped out, old, knackered sort of Luton van that my players have got racing a big American juggernaut lorry over a bridge, and that's how I wanted to begin. And so, and of course the lorry was a Costa Coffee, naturally. And as the scene played out, we had Starbucks and Cafe Nero lorries in there too, because of course, why wouldn't you? And it was great fun. But I was thinking, how do you do this in a normal corporation setting? You got the mission briefing, you go off and do your thing. And I thought, well, actually, why not start at the end of the adventure? Start where they're already talking to the big bad. And instead of a mission briefing, we have the final showdown. And so the way I set it up was the player, as I introduced the scene, they're in a dark, dimly lit room. Actually, I didn't even say them. I just introduced the scene first of all. So it's a dark, dimly lit room with wood panel walls, and one end of the room is a window overlooking the city of Boston. In front of it is a woman dressed in Renaissance period costume, apparently a bad cosplayer of Elizabeth I. At the other end of the room are three people chained to chairs. They each have a very large tub that has an intravenous line coming down into their wrist. And then she asks the question, "Tell me about how you came over here." And then I take us back in time, and we've got the lorry race going on. And so the player's like, okay, so who's this one? As that scene ended, I thought, well, okay, so I've done something. Let's play with this idea. Let's take it a little further. So as the session's playing out, it becomes apparent that the big showdown at the end is actually an interrogation. This woman in the dress and garb of Elizabeth I in the year 2400 is interrogating what turns out to be the players. That intravenous drip turns out to be a coffee line. She is the CEO of Costa Coffee. And so, all of this stuff gets revealed over time to the players. And what was really fascinating in the session was how, with this setup, I was able to go to different points in the story in any order I wanted. We did actually cover a section of the mission briefing. We actually were able to go back even further to stuff you wouldn't normally do in corporation. And it really, really worked. But this isn't something that is unique in the world of storytelling. The stories have been told this way before. And whilst I can't think of it, I didn't sort of begin saying I'm going to tell a story like that. I'm sure that it's been done many times. What's important, I think, to take away from that is when you see something in storytelling, whatever art form it is, whether it's a book or a film or a radio play or even the theatre, you can learn from the tools and tips and techniques and stuff that form part of that medium, because storytelling is universal. Whatever the story is, there is a hero's journey, and why why not take those tips, tricks and techniques? And then the more I think about that, the more I think about how old school gaming now, and this was, I kind of was vaguely aware of a debate going off in the community recently as, you know, old school gaming versus new school, and it was almost became very tribal, this argument on the internet between these two camps, you know, and me having been, you know, I started out as an old school gamer, but I've evolved with role playing to a certain extent, and I still do enjoy going back and doing the occasional dungeon bash. Haven't done one in a year or so, but you know, I like that. You know, it's cool, it's fun. But the more I kind of look back at old school gaming now, and I saw this. Actually, I had a comment on an old video this morning where somebody was saying, yeah, began the same way this did, you know, the whole thing about this particular video started off with all journeys are 3 encounters long, and that was very much an old school mindset thing. And they said, why not do a random encounter for every hex of the journey? And I thought, Foxtrot, no. No. Because there's no storytelling in a random encounter. It doesn't advance anything. Your heroes don't continue on their hero's journey. The plot isn't advanced. The NPCs aren't revealed, especially if you're rolling on a random encounter table. My word, what decade are you in? Well, clearly the 70s and 80s. I was there too. But, you know, these things now I don't think really do have a place in my games, at least. You know, that whole idea of you kill a monster, better find out what loot it's got, let's roll on the loot table and see what, a magic sword they could have used. You know, that's past now. Now, I think role-playing games are much more about the story, and ought to be, just as a personal feeling on, you know, when I tell a game, I think I want to engage my players. So I've got to start off telling the best first page of my adventure being the best adventure I've ever written, because I need to engage my players to make them want to play this game. Because why would you play a role-playing game when you could play a board game that's over in a fraction of the time and comes to a satisfactory resolution, when so often a role-playing game campaign goes on and peters out, or, you know, doesn't come to a conclusion? No, the important thing, I think, when playing in a role-playing game nowadays is to draw the players into the story that they want to complete the campaign, which is why my campaigns now, I hope, always finish now. I hope, touch wood. You know, when I go back to think about some of the games I did in my old school era, some of them didn't. And I think it was because I was blind to storytelling. I didn't understand it as an art form that I try to, you know, now I do not claim to be somebody who could tell, you know, who understands the true art of storytelling. Far from it. I consider myself a student, and, you know, when I started this channel, I was right at the start of that journey where I kind of realised I wanted to impart the stuff I was learning, as I was learning more and more about how to do this hobby of ours better. And, you know, I've come a long way since my very first video, although my very first video is one that everybody should watch. Dungeon Master Mistakes 1, Stop Rolling Dice. And it's not a stop rolling dice in an old school versus new school type of thing. It's a stop rolling dice in these specific situations. Here's some rules you can follow. And you know what? People still do those things, and it's... Why? Why do you... One of the things it covers, as my hair gets more and more messed up, one of the things it covers, the situation you're in a room with a locked door. I pick the lock, make you roll. You fail. Next turn, I pick the lock, roll again. Why would you do that? Why would you, as a GM, if the players have sufficient time and resources, let them open the damn door? However, here are some tips and tricks you can do to make a roll worthwhile. You know, put time pressure on, time constraints, and blah 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 blah. Anyway, go watch that video, very first one, if you find yourself rolling dice. And I need to talk more about, oh, my screensaver just came in, hopefully I didn't drop any frames. Anyway, I need to talk more about perception. Perception. I need to do an entire rant about perception tests. Anyway, my point is, when it comes to old school, new school gaming, whichever you want to play is fine with me. But I think, me personally, I came from old school. I like to do a pointless, aimless dungeon bash occasionally, and from time to time it's even fun to play D&D almost as like a tactical game. Yeah, it's great occasionally, but I really do prefer to tell a story, and I think as role players we can learn a lot by learning more about storytelling. So find tips on writing better screenplays, find tips on writing better books, use those skills in your games, in your storytelling games, because that's what a role-playing game is. It's telling a story. Okay, I'm going to finish this video off now. So thank you for watching the most standard role-playing video game. Like usually Pair of Geeks, I set up these big dramatic scenery things. Oh look, there's some scenery behind me. There we go. I've done it again. That side. So yes, and I do the miniatures thing and everything else. And you know what? After 3-4 years of it, I now rarely put videos out because there's so much work, and I achieved 3,000 subscribers, and with Jason joining the channel as well, we still haven't grown any quicker. Trickling new subscribers only. So I thought, you know what? I've got some things to say. I'm just going to say them to camera, and person in front of camera, just like every other channel out there, some of which have got hundreds of thousands of subscribers. How the hell did you do it with this cheap content? I suppose by giving good advice. Maybe I should focus on... I think I give good advice. I think I do. Go and look at some of the videos and you'll see, and then subscribe, please, because I only have like 3,000 subscribers. Very small channel, very tiny, and I want to be big. I want to get to 10,000 subscribers because I'm shallow. Alright, I'm good. Bye.